Hi class. In this recording we are going to focus on the anatomy of the female reproductive system singular. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I like to start from a superficial view and then work our way to the internal organs. So we'll focus on the vulva and the breast first. Here in visible body I have the female torso pulled up, or specimen pulled up, and I'll go ahead and unfade the integumentary system. So here we can see the human breast, particularly the adult female breast. And when we're looking at this adult breast, we have some structures that we need to emphasize. First, we have, oops, wrong button there. Let's go with green. This part that sticks out in the middle is referred to as the nipple, and then the darkened skin around the nipple is referred to as the areola. And then as we look at the breast as a whole, there's the main body of the breast. And then the breast will also extend into the armpit or axillary region. This portion that extends into the armpit is referred to as the axillary tail. So I'll go ahead and rotate our model here a little bit. Here we can better see how the nipple protrudes outward from the middle of the areola, and then this portion of the breast that extends in towards the armpit is referred to as the axillary tail. So that's our surface anatomy of the breast. Let's focus on the vulva next. I should note that this digital model has all pubic hair removed, so that it's easier for us to better see what we're looking at. So here is the vulva of the female anatomy. As we're looking at the vulva of the female anatomy, I want to first dive in and just quick view our structures. Mons pubis is the one that I'm always on the fence on. I'm going to cover it anyways, just because. So let's zoom out and focus on the mons pubis. The mons pubis is going to be a pad of adipose tissue, typically covered in pubic hair in sexually mature or post-pubescent females. And this serves the purpose to cushion the pubic bone. And it's going to be located right here. As we look in at the vulva in more detail, we can see there's these large folds of tissue around the outer edge. These large folds of tissue are referred to as the labia majora. Labia meaning lip, majora meaning large or big. And the labia majora typically are going to have a stratified squamous epithelium that's fully keratinized and will frequently have pubic hair present. The next structure we're going to focus on is the labia minora. Ooh, I did not want to zoom in right there. So I'll go ahead and click on it. Here we go. Now I've highlighted the labia minora for us. And the labia minora are much smaller folds of tissue. Labia minora means small lip. The labia minora are not going to have pubic hair present and instead are going to be covered with a mucous membrane. It's also worth noting that the labia minora are highly sensitive tissues and will also contain erectile tissues, so they can become engorged with blood. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that view. There we go. And then as we look at the prepuce for the female anatomy, the prepuce is sometimes referred to as the clitoral hood, and this is analogous to the foreskin in the male anatomy. And the prepuce will cover the clitoris, which is analogous to the glans penis in the male anatomy. And as we look at this clitoris, it's worth emphasizing that this structure has the highest density, the highest surface area concentration of sensory receptors of any structure within the human body. It's a very, very sensitive structure. We also have some orifices or openings I want to cover. First, we have the external urethral orifice. This is where the urinary system voids urine. The urethra will void urine within the female urinary system. And then we have the vaginal orifice, which visible body is not letting me select, so it's letting me select the vagina. But to emphasize the vaginal orifice, I just want to say the vaginal orifice is this external opening of the vagina. Orifice meaning opening. Now, as we look at the breast, there were some mammary gland structures within the breast that we needed to cover. So I'm going to go back to our digital cadaver. And get rid of our integumentary system to expose the breast and the structures within the breast. So first, within the breast, I want to emphasize that there's lots of adipose tissue present within the breast. The breast, in terms of volume, is mostly adipose tissue. And then the breast is going to have lobes. And I know visible body is calling these lobules, but your lab manual and most sources will call them lobes. The lobule is going to be individual little bumps within the lobe. So in green, I've circled some lobules, and then in red, I'll circle the whole lobe to better emphasize that structure. And that's so we can be consistent with what we have in your lab manual and lab objective sheet. We then have lactiferous ducts. Lactiferous ducts will carry milk produced at the lobes of the mammary gland to the nipple. And I want to emphasize something here that I didn't realize until I was older. If we look at a human breast, there are multiple openings at the nipple. Milk will exit the human breast through multiple orifices, and each orifice corresponds to an individual lactiferous duct. Not shown here in visible body is the enlarging of the lactiferous duct. And we have that on your lab objective sheet. That's referred to as the lactiferous sinus. So in between here and the apex of our mammary gland, of the nipple, we have a widening of the lactiferous duct referred to as the lactiferous sinus. Also, another structure which is not shown here in visible body to my satisfaction is the suspensory ligaments. And those are visible within your lab manual. They are branches of connective tissue that serve the function of supporting the breast. And these suspensory ligaments tend to stretch due to the force of gravity. Individuals that are well endowed or have large breasts tend to find that their suspensory ligaments will stretch out over time and the breast will sag more than individuals who have small breasts or a small cup size. Large breasts have more mass and will experience a larger force of gravity and more stretching. Small breasts have less mass and will experience less force from gravity and less stretching. So that's the breast and the vulva. Let's focus some more on some internal structures. Let's dive into the vagina. So we'll go ahead and move back down here to the vagina. And here we can see the vaginal canal that I've highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and give us a lateral view of the vagina. So here we can see that vagina extending inward to the female reproductive system. I really got to get rid of that bone right there. And these ligaments as well, which are not on your lab objective sheet. Hide, hide, hide. There we go. This is cleaning it up nicely for us. So now we can see the vagina in a much clearer view. And that vagina will extend towards the uterus. And if we look on the interior of the vagina, if I can do that. All right. Here we go. Here we have the interior view of the vagina and the end of the vagina. It's kind of hard to see this structure right here. I'm just going to go ahead and highlight that structure.
Vagina. Vagina.
It is not letting me select that. That is unfortunate. Zoom out just a skosh here. I need to use the mouse controls. All right, you know what? I'm going to hide the vagina. That'll make it easier to see. Here we go. Yep, there's the ticket. So right here we have this opening of the uterus. This opening is referred to as this cervix. And on our lab objective sheet, we can see the cervix listed right here. And in particular, we have the external os visible of the cervix right here. So this is our external os, the external opening to the uterus. And then what we see here that I'm circling in green is the cervix. And then in between the cervix and the wall of the vagina, it was hard for me to zoom in when the vagina was present, but there's this little space or pocket, circular pocket that goes around the cervix and is sandwiched in between the cervix and the wall of the vagina. That pocket is referred to as the fornix, the vaginal fornix sometimes. And the fornix is important, in particular if somebody's using a diaphragm or ring or sponge as a form of birth control, that they will insert that diaphragm and tuck it into the fornix so it wraps around the cervix and covers the external os, preventing sperm from gaining access to the female reproductive tract. As we look at the hymen is not visible in visible body. I included that on our lab objective sheet, though, because I want you to be aware of the hymen and what it does, or what it is. The hymen is a membrane, or a sheet of membranous tissue associated with the vagina, and this sheet of membranous tissue oftentimes will partially enclose the vaginal opening. So it'll make the vaginal opening artificially smaller. And the hymen typically is going to be the physical structure that's used to indicate virginity within an adult female, or just the female reproductive system. If an erect penis or other large solid object has penetrated the vaginal canal, it will tear the hymen, and the hymen will no longer be the small opening, but instead will have the larger opening. Here in visible body, there is no hymen present, so we can assume this is an individual who is no longer a virgin or has had vaginal intercourse. As we look at the ovaries of the female reproductive system, the ovaries are a twofer. They're analogous to the testes in the male reproductive system. We have an ovary over here on the right, and then another ovary on the left. And oocytes are ovulated from those ovaries and are picked up by the uterine tubes, also known as fallopian tubes. The uterine tubes will have small fingers called fimbriae that will gently massage the ovary and capture the oocyte and bring it in. And as we look at the fallopian tube, it's broken up into a couple regions. We have the fimbriae first, then the infundibulum, ampulla, and isthmus. And I like to think of this as the first third, the middle third, and the last third. So on our model here, in our view here, we can take the uterine tube or fallopian tube and break it up into segments. So we have a really skinny segment right here next to the uterus. That's the isthmus. Here we have our middle third, and we can go back to our lab objective sheet to double check on the terminology. Our middle third is the ampulla, and then the infundibulum is directly where the fimbriae connect. So if we were to look at the infundibulum is this region. Then we have the ampulla. And then right here where it gets narrow, we then are going to have the isthmus of the fallopian tube. Here we have the uterus. The uterus really doesn't need much of an explanation. If we highlight our uterus, I can remove the wall. And we can see some of the layers of the uterus and the internal os and the cervical canal. So I'll go ahead and remove the vagina or vaginal canal as well, so we can better see what we're looking at here. So right here is the internal opening to the uterus. That's the internal os. Here's the external opening. That's the external os. And the space in between is the cervical canal. And as we're looking at the uterus, we can zoom in even more. Come on. Here we go. Sometimes my mouse pad doesn't like to agree with me. There we are. Awesome. And so we have 3 layers. We have the innermost layer, which is the endometrium. We have the thickest layer, which is the myometrium. And then we have the outermost layer, which is very thin. That's the epimetrium. Or excuse me, perimetrium. I always like to think epi for surface. I am at the stage where I start to get my prefixes or my root words mixed up. So perimetrium is on the surface of the uterus. As we are looking at the endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium, those have asterisks next to them. So I want to pull them up here in visible body, or excuse me, in histology guide, so we can see the cross-sectional views. So here is a cross-sectional view of a uterus, and as we're looking at the endometrium is going to be this layer with lots of glands in it, and then the myometrium is going to be made up of the deeper layer with lots of smooth muscle associated with it. There's also going to be some clear spaces or lumens within the endometrium. Those lumens within the endometrium are referred to as uterine glands. And I talk about those in more detail in our discussion on oogenesis. As we look at the endometrium, there are 2 layers we have, or 2 parts of the endometrium. We have a functional layer, and then we have a basal layer. So the functional layer is oftentimes referred to as the stratum functionalis, and the deep basement layer is referred to as the stratum basale of the endometrium. And in this particular view, it's kind of hard to see those layers, the difference between the functional layer of the endometrium and the basal layer of the endometrium. But if I go to a menstrual phase view, it's a lot easier to see. So here's a view of a uterus that was in the middle of mensing. So it's in the menstrual phase. The basal layer, stratum basale, or the layer that doesn't slough off, is right here. It's very thin. And then here we have the functional layer in the process of sloughing off. And this layer is much thicker and will be ejected as menses, or menstrual flow. All right, let's clear that and exit this full screen view and go back to our lab objective sheet. As we look at the uterus regions, I haven't covered the fundus or body of uterus yet. So just for the sake of being thorough, let's cover that right now. The fundus of the uterus, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the entire skeletal system here. No ligaments, no bones, and the reproductive system is gone. That's a problem. All right, I reset my view. Now I'll get rid of the ligaments and bones and skin. There we go. This will make the view a lot cleaner. So as we're looking at the uterus can be broken up into 3 main regions. And this is a good view to show those 3 main regions. We have the cervix, or the neck of the uterus, that extends towards the vagina. And then where the fallopian tubes connect, you can draw a straight line across. Above that straight line, or superior, I should say, to that straight line, is the fundus of the uterus. And then in between the fundus of the uterus and cervix of the uterus is the main body of our uterus. I believe that's it for our lab objective sheet. I just want to quick glance over it to make sure I covered everything. And yeah, we are good to go on the female reproductive system. If you have any questions or comments on the structures of the female reproductive system, please feel free to post them on the class discussion board or shoot me an email. And as always, class, happy studies.